Hi, everybody. It's Debbie Aldrich. Welcome to the show. With me tonight, I have a friend and guest. He is the National Defense Advisor Researcher for Center of Security Policies, John Rossomando. Welcome to the show, John. Great to have you on.
Great to be back with you, Debbie.
Well, audience, if you can't tell by now, um, our show is about Russia and what is happening at the border of Ukraine. I've got some slides we're going to talk about in a minute. Sadly, you won't be able to see this live on YouTube, but hopefully you will find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Twitch, and it will post later once I get the recording and the video of this broadcast. But this is John, we've been hearing a lot on the news the last couple days. Actually, since last spring, because I have two articles from April where, let's see, this one here, April 14th, 2021, where Russia amasses troops near U.S. ally Ukraine. But what is Putin's goal? That was the headline in April of 2021, just last April. And here we are again, and this was from Alexander Smith and Matthew Bodner. Tens of thousands of Russian troops massing near the Ukrainian border, convoys of tanks, and deadly escalation. These storm clouds on Europe's eastern flank are giving grave alarm in Washington across the continent. We're now seeing the largest concentration of Russian forces on Ukraine's border since 2014. Here's another one. Massive buildup on Russian troops along the Ukraine border. This is now April 22nd, so it's like nearly a week later. April 22nd of 2021. And another article about this. So what is happening? What was happening then in comparison to what is happening now? Because we're seeing troops once again. Did those troops withdraw in April, or is this an addition to those troops that we're seeing amassing at the border in Ukraine today?
Well, those troops dissipated after that initial buildup. According to intel report that was obtained by the Washington Post, current intel assessment warns of an invasion next month. They say that Ukraine will face about 170,000 Russian troops on its borders, and it talked about the likelihood of an invasion from the northeast, an invasion from the north toward Kiev, and movements up from Crimea. I mean, just in the past 72 hours, we saw videos circulating on Facebook of Russian troops, jeeps, and so forth.
Let me show that picture so they know what you're talking about. Here it is.
Russian supply train moving near the Ukrainian border. Yesterday, a local source in Ukraine, based on a posting on a Russian nationalist Telegram channel, showed buildup down in Crimea, near the entrance of to the mainland of Ukraine. So we're seeing a buildup last month, according to Ukrainian intelligence. The Russians, sent supplies, including electronic warfare gear, fuel, weapons, drones to the Russian mercenaries and their forces that they have deployed in eastern Ukraine, in Donetsk. I mean, one of the first things you end up wanting to look at is something that's going to come down is troop movements, and are they moving supplies? Are they moving supplies into Donetsk? I mean, one of the things that I had read was a weakness of the Russian army is its logistics battalions. So it could end up having problems with maneuver once it gets over 100 miles from its supply depots. I mean, there likely are supply depots in Donetsk and Luhansk, which is in eastern Ukraine, which the Russians successfully pried away from Kiev's control after the Maidan revolution in early 2014.
Well, yeah, we saw under Obama when Biden was a vice president. We saw the same kind of thing happening that you just recalled, and and now it's happening again. We didn't really see this happening under Trump because what Trump? What was the difference? What was the
But
difference?
the difference was that Obama, went and did everything he could to appease the Russians, starting with the Russia reset in 2008, 2009, where they were turning away from the Bush administration's desire to slap sanctions on Russia. They took things off. I mean, they went and things kind of ironic about the whole Russia Gate thing is they went and accused Trump of violating the Magnitsky Act, which is this measure that was pushed through by Congress to sanction Russian oligarchs uh, over due to a Russian dissident or lawyer or something like that who was being held by the Russians. Well, the Obama administration fought against passing that law. And remember when Obama went and told then President Medvedev that he would have an easier time with passing the START treaty after the election. So what he saw, what Putin ended up seeing, is that these guys were jokes. They could be pushed around. I don't think that they saw that Trump could be pushed around, even though they went crazy because Trump talked about trying to have friendly relations with the Russians. Whether he was talking about he admired Putin, etc. That was just diplomatic niceties. But in
Yeah,
reality,
but the left went wild because
exactly.
they were already had this dossier had already been coming to light, the fake, which turned out to be fake, a fake Russian dossier about very salacious things and with Trump and Russia and you know a whole host of other things in that dossier that turned out to be fake, which I think most of us knew it was, but the left wanted to keep pulling those strings through his entire term in office, which also then did not help in the election. In the meantime, they silenced any media that was reporting prior to the election Hunter Biden's ties to Ukraine and China in a pay to play scheme, which has now really come to light. But they squashed that. So we got our own government playing Russian roulette, basically.
Well, that's right. I mean, we ended up letting the Russian propaganda war become paramount. I mean, don't forget that back when the Russians started the uprising in eastern Ukraine, President Obama said, "We're not going to send weapons." I remember being in a meeting with Senator Inhofe, who was then just a member of the Armed Services Committee, complaining about how the Obama administration was only sending blankets and they weren't going to give arms. President Trump sent Javelin missiles to Ukraine. He, ramped up American support for training the Ukrainian army and increasing. No, I mean, they went and impeached President Trump. Partly, they claimed because he was trying to prevent the delivery of arms or so forth to the Ukrainians. Now we have President Biden. The first thing he does as president is to give President Putin in Russia a leniency on the START treaty. He let him have everything. The Trump administration wanted to include Russia's thousands of tactical nuclear weapons that are used in battlefield situations. Biden let that off the hook. Then what we ended up seeing, Biden backing down on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is sort of gray zone warfare. I mean, gray zone is sort of where you go close to the edge, but you don't have open bullets flying. And Putin saw that, like the Soviets before him, as a way to divide NATO. Back in the early 1980s, President Ronald Reagan smashed down on the Europeans for wanting to take Soviet gas because he saw that it would divide the alliance.
And Trump mentioned that to Merkel at a summit when he said, "You want me to defend you while you are buying your gas or your fuel from Putin. You want me to defend you from Putin. Why don't you just buy it from me?"
Right. I mean,
it's nothing has made sense really for a long time, whether we're dealing with outgoing Angela Merkel and the European Union, Russia, and the Trump administration. When he was putting his foot down, when he was standing up to these leaders who weren't pushing his buttons, we look at what's happening with Xi Jinping and what he's doing today. And and tell me if I'm wrong. Do they see weakness in Biden?
Well, they see Biden as an empty suit. They see him as a man who isn't going to, stand in their way. So, they, made sure that Trump didn't get reelected via various means. Like supporting the Antifa riots last year. I mean, you had both China and Russia involved in supporting Antifa. So, what do we expect? I mean, I think that you also have to look at the German elites. Former Prime Minister of Germany, Chancellor Gerhard Schröder, is Putin's puppet. They set up this thing called the Petersberger Dialogue in 2001 that has sway among the German leadership. And Putin, don't forget that Angela Merkel met her husband in Moscow back in the 1970s.
That sounds like Bernie Sanders honeymooning in Russia.
Right. And she was part of this, Christian Democratic Union, which was sort of the East German communists controlled opposition in the East German parliament. So Merkel has a almost 50-year connection with Russia. So, the one thing that's kind of interesting is how the American, establishment looks to Germany for their guidance. They were all upset. We were making us look bad to the world. Well, when they were talking about the world that Trump was making, they meant Germany. And Germany, has parties like if you want to talk about the left in America, something called the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation that is dominated by former Stasi agents, and its representative in Moscow is a former Stasi agent who wrote reports for the KGB back in the 70s. So,
and what about the Frankfurt School? Didn't that originate?
No, we're going further back. I'm talking current. The Rosa Luxemburg Foundation works.
That kind of led to a lot of stuff that
the Yeah, the Rosa
Overtime.
Luxemburg Foundation works closely with the Democratic Socialists of America, AOC, Bernie, and supports and funds and has funded Antifa, and it's loyal to Putin.
Yeah.
So you have subversive action. I mean, and the far right and the far left in this country and in Europe have ties to the Russians. And you know who Nancy Pelosi met with in the spring of 2017? Members of the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation and Syriza, which is a pro Putin party in Greece, and another one in Spain.
Gee, who is really colluding with Russia?
I
Seems
know.
more like the Democrats. They were meeting with all these groups, around the world, and while Trump was trying to negotiate deals to keep, our country strong and safe, he put our country first, and it seems like they didn't. And we can't forget, that Biden's son Hunter Biden was placed in this position in Ukraine, and a Burisma with as a fuel, as an energy company that he didn't have a background in at all. Then he goes to China and he does all these things with China. Now we know that Ukraine has been steeped in corruption for a long time. There are a lot of really good people in Ukraine, and it seems like their current president is really trying hard to, you know, bring their country to safety. He gave a great speech on, encouraging the people to stand strong, that they were going to defend and defeat Russia if they were to invade Russia. But there is still a lot of corruption in Ukraine, and it seems like the Democrats don't mind playing footsies with some of these countries that really are not friendly to us. And I'm not talking about the Ukrainian people, but a lot of the corruption in Ukraine, and also what's happened with, with Biden and his family in China with Xi Jinping. But getting back to what is happening at the border, I wish I could have had the clip of the video that you played. And folks, you need to go to John Rossomondo's Twitter feed and watch see the video, because your video of the train is of tanks and Jeeps and all kinds of equipment. I mean, it goes on and on and on forever, being sent from Russia to the border of Ukraine. And according to General Kellogg, a retired Colonel General Kellogg, and retired General King, Jack King, that listening to them today, that if Putin does go into Ukraine and it makes that choice to go in, that NATO's done.
Well, I think that NATO was basically done after the end of Afghanistan. I mean, if you started seeing like the Spanish talking about a European defense force that didn't include the United States because the U.S. wasn't reliable. I mean, the Poles and the Balts are terrified that we're not going to stand with them, and the Germans are basically useless. I mean, the Brits I would definitely stand with Ukraine, but I think that we're seeing that Putin does not fear NATO anymore. NATO has become a paper tiger, especially now that we have President Biden in office. President Biden ran for president saying he was going to strengthen NATO. He was going to strengthen multilateralism. But instead, he's undermined the alliance. When he decided that he was going to go forward and say yes, master, to Vladimir Putin when it came to the Nord Stream pipeline, instead of sanctioning the heck out of it, that was a real stab in the heart of the alliance, because it was part of Putin's strategy to divide the alliance.
And as my husband always says, Joe Biden made Putin rich, is making Putin rich. We shut down our pipeline here. Now we had to tap into our reserve. which if we go to war, what are we going to do? We tapped into our reserve. And at the same time, he's allowed, like you said, Nord Stream to progress for Putin. And it's absolutely ridiculous. While you keep talking, I'm going to show some of these slides. The first slide I'm going to show is the picture I showed you with all the different tanks. But your video had a lot more, I think was more impressive. But I'm going to show also an aerial.
Well, I'll just simply say that Biden's environmentalist effort to shut down domestic pipelines and to reduce the amount of anticipated oil resources has been a net benefit to Vladimir Putin. The entire Russian economy depends on high oil prices. When President Reagan worked with Saudi Arabia in the 1980s, he brought oil prices down to $9 a barrel. That destroyed the Soviet economy. The Soviets could not keep up. I mean, if everything Biden's doing, with his global warming agenda, is a net benefit to Vladimir Putin and his war machine. Because if you drove down the price of oil, it would really hurt the Russian economy. But now Putin is flush with cash. Now he can enhance his oil and gas blackmail of Western Europe. It's a complete and utter disaster. I mean, we have people who are rank amateurs who don't look at things in 3 and 4 different dimensions. They're one-dimensional thinkers. Where they're like, we're going to save the environment. Okay, well, it's sort of like I think that if you want to look at President Trump was make America great again, but Joe Biden is make Russia great again.
It's so true. That's what my husband always says. Every time we fill up our car with gas and we see it's, $80 to fill up our car, it's like, we're just making Putin rich, it's crazy. But, the scary thing is that we've tapped into our reserve, and now there's talk about possibly opening up a Keystone Pipeline again. I mean, this administration really seems bipolar. They don't really seem to know what they really stand for, what they really want to do, and which direction to. Well, I think they know which direction they'd like to take the country. But tomorrow, Biden is to speak with Putin on the phone about Ukraine. And both General Kellogg and General Keane said that this talk with Putin is extremely important and must be forceful in convincing Putin to not take steps any further in aggression towards Ukraine, and also to threaten sanctions. Will Biden do that?
Well, the thing about the Biden administration is foreign policy is don't you dare. I mean, that's the entire foreign policy. Threaten sanctions. I mean, okay, what are you going to do if you want to really harm the Russian economy? Drive the price of oil down into the basement. Sanction their leadership and so forth. Sanction anybody who's involved with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and work to strong arm the Germans into shutting it down. I mean, that's what you do. I mean, this administration and the Democratic and the blob, the foreign policy establishment, is about being reactive, not proactive. President Trump was proactive. These guys are just reactive, and I don't think that Vladimir Putin will really care much. I mean, after we went and sanctioned him in 2014, he turned to China. We could help to create the alliance between Russia and China because the Chinese were all too happy to take up the credit and so forth that they would have gotten from the West. So sanctions don't have the same sort of bite that they used to now with China having a $14 trillion economy and being the center of world commerce.
But they seem to work under Trump. He seemed to know how to push sanctions through that had results versus it's so funny because the clock keeps going off. I don't know if it's silencing me or what, but anyway, it's funny. But yeah, it seemed like the sanctions worked, whether we were talking about Iran, whether we're talking about China or Russia, that they worked under Trump. And we saw our economy boom. We saw our oil prices go down, and it benefited in our economy was just booming, benefited the American people. And the opposite is happening now. And it really does boil down to leadership. And the leadership in this country, I think we've really lost so much respect around the world. We see Xi Jinping, we see, Putin, even Iran. They're really are pretty flippant with Biden's administration. They really, and they see that administration kind of in turmoil too. You look at what's happening with Vice President Kamala Harris, where her staff is just, all bailing, abandoning her ship, basically. So, and that's kind of unnerving when you think here we have a president that's, older in age, and we have a vice president who is completely her staff. Everything's just falling apart, and evidently behind the scenes she's kind of a monster, and in public she's laughing all the time, and unable to answer questions. And so I think it doesn't play well overseas.
Well, I think that if you look at now, I heard the best way to describe our leadership today. It's a kleptocracy. They only care about enriching themselves. They don't care about the country. I mean, I don't see much of a difference between our leaders, who enrich themselves on the backs of Americans, and who put their financial interests before those of the nation, and Vladimir Putin's and his clique, raping the Russian people blind. I mean, it's like we saw it last year. They went and sided with Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party against Donald Trump. Why? Because Donald Trump was bad for business, with his trade wars, with his economic policies that they didn't like. I mean, so what are you going to expect? A kleptocrat's going to be a kleptocrat.
Right. Yeah, it's so true, and it's so obvious. And frankly, the mainstream media has been in bed with them as well,
Well,
helping them. Go
I
ahead.
think we should just call Joe Biden the kleptocrat in chief.
Yeah, exactly. They've all been in bed together because by silencing the reports of Hunter Biden and the Biden family making bank basically on ties with, China, and not being able to report on that. And now we've got the laptop from hell that has exposed even more about the Biden family corruption, and not being able to report that and being silenced by social media, mainstream media. And yet we had to live for 4 years through the Russian collusion that turned out to be fake. But isn't that the way corrupt people work?
Exactly. They set up lies about their enemies. They go after their supporters. I mean, look at Putin and what he did to Alexei Navalny. I mean, poisoning him, intimidating people by shutting down the free press that existed after the Soviet Union until maybe the mid 2000s. So they're going to do everything they can to intimidate people into silence. I mean, basically, we have social media does what the Russian state does, and now Biden wants to put a woman at the FCC who believes in censoring conservatives. How is that different from what you have in Russia?
Exactly. And that's exactly what's going to happen if we don't reverse courses at this point. I want to show the two maps I have of Ukraine for those folks that are watching, that they can get kind of a sense of the demographics of what's there, the countries around them. Ukraine is, well, we see Ukraine here, and this is a Russian map, and you can see the red little soldiers. That's where the Russians are right now, and along the border. And here's another map, and this is a really good map for people to see where Russia is in regards to Ukraine, Belarus, which Russia has also threatened Belarus and has been, threatening them on and off, just like they have done with Ukraine. We see Poland on the other side. We also know that there are a lot of migrants coming through. I believe it's Belarus, isn't that where the
Yes,
migrants
that's correct.
trying to push through Poland? Are these migrants coming through Russia then, or where are they coming up from?
Well, they're coming up from Turkey through Russia into Belarus, and the Belarusian KGB. I mean, after the end of the Soviet Union, they kept the KGB name, unlike the other republics. Has been pushing the migrants toward Poland because the goal again is to divide the EU. I
Mhm.
mean, Germany is pro-migrant. Poland wants to maintain its Catholic Slavic identity, and the Poles have put down their whip. I mean, thankfully, the Germans have come to the Poles' aid and said that this is completely being orchestrated by Putin and his henchman Lukashenko in Belarus, and it's it's another example of what I was talking about gray zone warfare, using migrants flows as a weapon. I mean, it's an
What's
invasion.
happening here as well?
Exactly. I mean, it's you sort of divide, work to divide and conquer, but that hasn't had the sort of effect. I mean, Lukashenko went and said that he was going to ask Putin to base nuclear weapons on Belarusian territory, which were removed at the end of the Soviet Union. Ukraine also had nuclear weapons, but they signed an agreement with the Clinton administration, and I believe it was 1994, to give up their nuclear weapons. Now they're threatened by Russia and its nuclear arsenal. And one of the things I foresaw the Russian takeover of eastern Ukraine at the when they went and threw out the pro-Russian president Yukonovich, because I'm like looking where Yukonovich won, were the majority Russian, ethnic Russian areas. If you go and superpose a map of the old Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth over Ukraine, that's the northern and western part of the country. That was part of Poland at one point, whereas the rest was all part of Russia. And I know that they're ethnic Russians in the east, and I foresaw that the Russians would foment trouble in eastern Ukraine, and we would have an invasion, and with Crimea and so forth, we ended up seeing that. So I think that we have to be concerned about what's going to happen with the upcoming Olympics. It could either happen before or after, because after the Sochi Games in 2014 was when Putin sent his mercenaries into Crimea.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. I was hearing, I believe it was Marsha Blackburn, Senator Blackburn, talk about how we have the ability to say, let's not hold the Olympics in China. We should have done this a long time ago, that we can put something together quickly. We have enough means and facilities, we can do that, especially actually here in Utah. We may be up for another Olympics bid here soon.